Tom Fishburne is the founder of Marketoonist. From drawing cartoons on the back of business cases as a student at Harvard Business School, his cartoons now reach over 100,000 marketers weekly and have been featured by major publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and the New York Times. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Tom Fishburne.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is so great to be here. So I want to talk today as both a cartoonist, here we are, and as a marketer. And I want to talk about the medium of cartoons, and I think what we can learn, all of us, from the medium of cartoons that can apply to any form of content creation and engagement. And I want to start with the caption contest. So Social Bakers sent this out last week or 2 weeks ago. How many of you saw this come through as part of the communication leading up? So a few of you. I asked you to think of a caption for this cartoon. And I love doing this because you can have a room full of people all looking at the same image, and you all see different things. You can put yourself in the cartoon and imagine, what is this guy doing in a cannon? So I thought I would start by sharing some of my favorites. I can't share all of them, but I got over 30 responses from you for different ways to interpret this drawing. And I'm just going to walk through a couple of my favorites. Don't tell my wife I'm going to Bali. Google Maps said this was the fastest way home. So remember to press record before lighting up, okay? Make sure you capture my face in case things go viral. You're going to open the window, right? You're fired. Does this cannon make my butt look fat? Send me to Wakanda. Tell my wife I'll either be home in 30 seconds or never. Are you sure you're Elon Musk? What doesn't kill you makes you viral. So can I get a round of applause for those of you who... Thank you. So I love what you came up with, and for those of you who saw your name up here, come find me in the break after the panel, and I have a couple of cartoon books that I want to give to you as thank you for responding to this. And hopefully it gave you a feel of one of the things I love about cartoons. I love the medium of cartoons. One of the things I love about it is this combination of text and image. It's what cartoonists describe as text-image interdependence. You have words and you have a picture, and each of them conveys some meaning on their own. But when you put the two together, the result is greater than the sum of its parts. It's sort of this magical alchemy that can happen when you put words and pictures together. The first cartoons people think about actually go back quite a long ways. The Bayeux Tapestry in 1070 is considered one of the first cartoons, and it's led all the way through the last 1,000 years in various forms and various ways of putting words and pictures together. You have Punch magazine in England in the 1800s. You have newspaper cartooning in the US in the early part of this century. You have all the way up through the New Yorker cartoons, and memes are really a form of this too, putting words and pictures together. And it's a powerful combination. It's a very old medium, but it's actually something that I think is quite powerful because of its simplicity and because you can often simplify very complex ideas by putting words and pictures together. So I love this medium. I fell in love with cartoons when I was a little kid. These were my heroes growing up. That's Bill Watterson, who drew Calvin and Hobbes, Gary Larson, who drew The Far Side, and Berkeley Breathed, who drew Bloom County. And as a kid, we used to get a big newspaper, a Sunday newspaper, and I would sit on the floor and I would look at these cartoons and I would redraw them, and then I would change all the dialogue to basically make fun of my brothers. And it gave me a way to punch a little bit harder than my weight. And it taught me the power of cartoons. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up. But then reality kind of set in. This is a drawing that Bill Watterson drew a few years ago for a documentary film about cartooning. And it's kind of the reaction of cartoonists in this world where newspapers and magazines are imploding. And cartoonists are really in this soul-searching environment where the way that they have published their work over the last few years is really disappearing. And in fact, my three heroes all quit the world of cartooning. Only Berkeley Breathed has come back recently as soon as Donald Trump announced that he was running for president because he felt like he couldn't afford to sit on the sidelines for that. But everybody else sort of quit the world of cartooning. But what I find interesting about this is the dog in the right-hand corner. Bill Watterson drew a little moment of hope to kind of show how, while cartooning in the form of newspapers is declining, in some ways there's never been a better need for putting words and pictures together to communicate ideas. And so that gets me really excited. So I stopped cartooning for a long time, and then I came back to it at a very unlikely place, Harvard Business School. It's not exactly a feeder school for cartoonists, but I found myself at Harvard Business School, and I started drawing cartoons about student life. And this cartoon shows the view from the professor's point of view on the left, and then the view from the students on the right. And I started publishing a cartoon every week in the student newspaper. And I loved what cartoons could do in terms of communicating ideas simply, communicating with niche audiences in a deep and meaningful way. And it got me really excited about the world of cartooning again. But then I graduated, and I ended up working in marketing. I didn't see that there was a potential of actually being a cartoonist. So I was at General Mills, I was at Nestle, I was at a company called Method, I was at a travel company called Hotel Tonight, and I decided that I would start drawing cartoons about my day job, about my life. And because this was in 2002, and I didn't have a student newspaper anymore, I just set up a simple email newsletter. And I emailed a few of my colleagues saying, I'm going to start drawing this cartoon about marketing. If you're interested, sign up for the newsletter. And within a few weeks, I had a few hundred subscribers, and then a few thousand. And then as social media started to take off, I started publishing my work there as well. And it just started growing over time and became a big part of my life, communicating my day job in marketing through the world of cartoons. And I started describing what I was seeing around me, the evolution of advertising, starting with this snake oil salesman, going through to the Mad Men era, describing products. They're great. And then more recently, don't forget the purse you browsed 6 months ago, and then audiences installing ad blockers. Or in the world of social media, the 7 deadly sins of social media marketing. Lust. Let's pay for followers to pretend to like our brand. Sloth. We can treat all social networks the same. Gluttony. We'll stuff everyone's feeds with spam. Pride. We are awesome. Please retweet. Greed. Sponsored. We are awesome, as is this sale. Envy. Let's hijack whatever is trending. Hashtag sale, hashtag Clooney. And then wrath. Why is no one engaging? Let's just shout louder. I may have a big YouTube following, but are you sure I'm a good fit to promote your insurance brand? I'm only 12. Just do something millennial. Tell us again how Snapchat will help our brand sell more term life insurance? I think my Nest smoke alarm is going off. Google AdWords just pitched me a fire extinguisher and an offer for temporary housing. So I cartooned the world around me, and I started finding this audience and finding this connection. And my day job in marketing was all about connecting with audiences. And I suddenly found that the audiences I was connecting with through my own cartoons were teaching me more about how to do that than actually my job in marketing. And I got really excited about what that could mean. And I started thinking maybe cartoons, I could evolve from cartoons about marketing to cartoons as marketing. And I started thinking about the world of content marketing. Daddy, instead of a story, can you read me some branded content? And often falling a little bit light, we finally found a way to get people to engage with our content. Careful, the last content was full of marketing. So I started drawing cartoons about what I was seeing around me. And eventually, brands started to contact me to see if I could create something for their brand. And I described to them, this is my hobby. This is my outlet. This isn't a business. But the first big call that I got was from the Asian Wall Street Journal. And they asked me to create a cartoon book for the Asian Wall Street Journal about how to get the most out of the journal. And I thought if one of the best kind of news organizations is contacting me for storytelling, I should pay attention. So I started to think maybe there's a way that cartoons could be used as something more. And then 8 years ago, I achieved my childhood dream and became a cartoonist full-time. And thank you. And I ended up partnering with a few other cartoonists who are very talented storytellers, and we basically built up a small studio that specializes in helping brands tell stories through this unique medium of cartoons. And I still draw a cartoon every week about marketing, and then I also get to work with really interesting brands on how to tell stories using this very old, but I think very timely medium of cartoons. And what I thought I would do today is to share a few of the lessons that I picked up over the last 8 years. I want to share 4 sort of takeaways on things that I think all marketers can learn from the medium of cartoons to apply to any form of marketing that you do, and driving engagement and creating content. And a lot of the philosophy that I've developed over time is kind of summed up that the best marketing doesn't feel like marketing. And I think this often gets forgotten. It's so simple. But I think that that's one thing that cartoons have taught me, and actually having an audience every week, what things people respond to, it's kind of shaped how I think about marketing. So the first idea I want to share with you is this idea that pain points are funny. So often as marketers, when we think about marketing our products, we very quickly get into features and benefits mode. How do we describe our single-minded proposition, how our product is better? And I find that cartoons, what they often do very well is bring humor into a conversation. And I think there's never been a more important need for humor, and I think there's a role for humor in business far more than it is today. And a lot of times people struggle with how do you find humor in certain situations? What's the butt of the joke? How do you find humor in a way that's not going to offend people? And so one of the first entry points that I often think about with cartoon campaigns, but I think it's relevant to how you connect with your audiences, is to start with pain points. And if you find humor in pain points, it shows empathy with the audience that you're trying to reach. And often humor can be disarming and shows that you're not laughing at them, you're laughing with them about something that they're frustrated about. So cartoons have been used for marketing for a long time. These are the Flintstones teaching a generation of children how to smoke Winston cigarettes. But I think this reflects a little bit the outdated mindset of marketing about being very features and benefits driven. And this outdated mindset quickly gets exposed in the world of social media. I have new baby pics to share. I just got back from my reunion. Did you know that we have 7 subs under 6 grams of fat? If you're going to crash our news feed, at least make it interesting. And I think that a lot of the early forays into social media for brands sounded a bit like this, and I think still does, and strikes a discord, and often assumes falsely that as marketers, our audiences are thinking about our brands as much as we're thinking about our brands. That if you were to somehow do a X-ray on the brain of a target consumer, you would start to think about how they're thinking about things. My husband, my kids, my career. I don't see our brand of pickle relish anywhere. Inconceivable, this is a brand loyalist. We often forget that our audiences don't think about our brands as much as we do. And one thing that audiences do think about are pain points. And that's why that's an interesting place to start. So I want to share a couple of recent examples of campaigns that I've worked on where we've started with pain points and then have tried to find humor in those pain points. So we work with this organization in Australia called the Travel Medicine Alliance. And they're trying to encourage people when they leave Australia on a big trip, before they go see a doctor and get your vaccines, travel with a medicine kit. And so they wanted to think about how to communicate that idea. And very easily, you can bore people. But we started with pain points and we started with humor and developed kind of a fun series around this. What a cute little guy. I wonder if he has a name. It's rabies. No thanks, I already picked up a parasite and a respiratory tract infection. And so finding some of the humor and the pain there then sets up the opportunity to communicate more broadly. And this is something that they're doing in all areas of their social media, but also more traditional media as well, but using cartoons to kind of convey some of this idea. Or something as boring as budgeting software. Pain points can often be a really fun and engaging way in. I scheduled this colonoscopy to get out of the budget review. It's less invasive and I won't remember it. And it's a much more engaging way to talk about budgeting software than budgeting software, but it kind of sets up that conversation for the audience they're trying to reach. Or something like getting a loan. And this first example, there's an expression in English about something being really expensive and costing an arm and a leg. And she's saying, now that the teaser rate is over, you owe us an arm and a leg, and she's holding a saw. Or here's somebody climbing this crazy scavenger hunt, Congratulations, you've now provided all the information we need to say no. And so you articulate pain points in a way, and we found that our audiences that we're trying to reach with these campaigns, it starts to resonate with them. It resonates with what they're dealing with, what they're grappling with. We had the opportunity recently to work with LinkedIn on a campaign within their own channel. They were finding that people were building their LinkedIn profiles and then never ever going back and updating them. And the other thing they realized is that if you ever noticed that people don't talk in LinkedIn like they talk in real life, you meet somebody like at this whole event, and then you go to their LinkedIn profile, and the way they describe what they do is filled with buzzwords and jargon. So LinkedIn looked at that, and they actually did a big survey to see the most commonly used buzzwords in every country around the world. And then we tried to build a campaign to get people to rethink how they describe what they do. And the campaign was imagining if people actually talk that way in real life. When I grow up, I want to be an effective and efficient management professional. Okay, guys, let's get out there and show them some strategically executed organizational problem solving. Which boots make me look more results-driven? And it gave LinkedIn a way to connect with people. They ended up serializing these individually through their own channels, and then because they owned SlideShare, they stitched it all together into a big presentation, including the cartoons, the survey results, and into one big piece of media, ultimately, where the cartoons could be syndicated individually and then ultimately put together into a bigger storyline. And so we find that thinking with pain points is one of the best ways to start when doing this. Okay, the second idea I want to share is about the power of the inside joke. And a lot of times as marketers, we think about going as broad as possible. And it's one of the things I think that has caused traditional cartooning to struggle in this world of social media. That when you have newspapers that have to be broadly read by every age group from 8 to 88, you have to have your content generally applicable to everyone. And when you try that, you're not going to be meaningfully unique to any one group in particular. And so that's, I think, a real struggle for some of the classic cartoons. But what I'm seeing with cartoons that are resonating right now is that the more niche, the better. So this cartoon is one of the most widely read web comics in the world. The name of the cartoon is XKCD. How many of you are familiar with that? So a few of you. So it's kind of niche. This is one of their most popular cartoons. Randall Munroe, the cartoonist behind this. Make me a sandwich. What? Make it yourself. Pseudo make me a sandwich. Okay. You might not get the humor of this unless you happen to be someone who works with Unix. And Unix is a programming language where pseudo means that you can take over another computer and get it to do whatever you want. So if you're a Unix programmer, this is actually pretty funny. And I shared this cartoon a couple of years ago in London, and no one laughed. But then one guy stood up, and he was wearing this as his T-shirt. And within a certain group, this became, again, the most widely read webcomic on Earth. It's over 1 million uniques every single day for this cartoon. And many of the ideas are as indecipherable as the previous one. A lot are more mainstream, but it's kind of a mix. He created a cartoon once that I won't read through this, but if you can look in the bottom left panel, you'll see a string of numbers. Just in the middle of this cartoon, he just put a string of numbers with no explanation. And it turned out that the string of numbers related to a latitude, a longitude, a date, and a time. And enough of his readers cracked that code to realize that that latitude and longitude related to a field outside of Boston, Massachusetts, a couple of weeks after this cartoon came out. And at that date and time, and in that place, several thousand people showed up in a field, purely based on the fact that those numbers were there once. And that's the power, I think, of connecting with a niche audience and having inside jokes that not everybody gets. I think there's a lot of power in that. We talked earlier today about being really narrow, targeted with personas, and reaching social in ways that are extremely narrow and niche. And it's a powerful way to communicate is to think about your content that way too. Something that's not for everybody, intentionally so. Who else should we target? You know, it's kind of the opposite of that kind of approach. Where here's a shoe store with all these different types of shoes, running shoes, hiking, climbing, cycling, all in one. Which I drew once, but then later I found this image somewhere. So go figure. But I think this is a bit of a metaphor for what can often happen when we're creating content. We create this, and it ends up not being that relevant to any one group in particular. And so there's a lot of power, I think, in being really niche and focused. And something that I find that the campaigns for us that work the best are when we use inside jokes that are not for everyone. So in the world of ad tech, for instance, ad tech is really simple. You just need an RFP from a DMP to help your SSP get the best ECPM from DSPs with RTB using an API in your SDK. WTF? Again, not for everyone. And these are one of the ones, my parents ring me up when they see these and ask what they mean. And that's a good thing if your content isn't broadly understood by everybody. Or modern office culture. I'm going to lunch, want to come? Maybe, ask me on Slack. Hang on, did you say video call? And so it's for people who've been in these situations where they're inside jokes that are relevant to a group. And these are cases where we're working with brands that are trying to reach really specific audiences. And in this case, this whole series about modern office life became something that people wanted to collect artifacts of the cartoons themselves. So they set up a simple way for people to pick their favorite cartoons and get them on tchotchkes like mugs and things at their desk. It became something that was ultimately collectible because it was relevant to them on a very niche level. And I think that's a really important way to think about the content that we create. Is it something so good that people would actually want to collect? This is a field that many of you may not have even heard of, e-discovery. When big companies sue each other and they have to exchange documents electronically, there's a whole field that's emerged called e-discovery. It has its own inside jokes that are very specific and indecipherable. And we created a weekly series for over 5 years for this company all about this niche field. And while it seems very niche, a lot of these jokes may not be understood more broadly, you do reach critical mass. I had the opportunity, I got invited to New York when they had a big trade show, and they had one of the cartoons on a billboard ad in Times Square. And when I went to the trade show event, they had a whole booth and an opportunity to get signed cartoons. And there were a ton of people who showed up. And it taught me the power of really having inside jokes that are meaningful to a few. Okay, the third idea I want to share is the idea of serial being more important than viral. I think for too long, marketers have been chasing this idea of creating content to go viral. And often either creating one piece and saying it needs to go viral, or having the spaghetti against the wall approach where you're just trying to cram as much content out there in the hopes that something that goes viral. And I think there's something about the medium of cartoons that I've learned about this importance of setting expectations where there's a serial output over time. Blake talked earlier today about Luxury, his company, and about how they had a weekly video and set people's expectations to come back and tune into the next installment of the weekly video. And that's exactly what I mean. The Peanuts cartoon ran every single day for 50 years. Imagine that length of continuity in content production. Very often, marketers think a quarter by quarter or a campaign by campaign mentality. And I think there's a role in thinking in the longer term. What we need to boost sales is a viral video. On the count of 3, do something funny. After our Gangnam Style tribute goes viral, we'll follow up with Harlem Shake in Q4. We're creating more content than their audience can actually consume. That's a good topic for our next blog post, white paper, infographic, listicle, and animated GIF. And I think a lot of this comes back 5 years ago was when the famous Super Bowl happened, where the whole game went dark. And Oreo was the first brand to come out and have content specifically about that event. And I think that set this expectation about trying to find the next lightning in a bottle moment, something that goes viral. But I think what was more impressive to me about what Oreo did was a separate campaign that was called 100 Days of Oreo, where they created a different piece of content every day for 100 days to celebrate different occasions. And for 100 days, there's a different piece of content every single day celebrating something that was going on. And not any one of these necessarily will go viral, but by setting that expectation, people were looking out for the next installment. And I think that's the mentality that we as marketers need to bring to content production, is to think more on how you would describe things as a series, as an ongoing series, not just as a one-off. And it's something a lot of our campaigns have been running for a long time. This is a company called Kronos. We've been creating a weekly cartoon for them for over 8 years now. Every single week for 8 years, they've published a cartoon for their audience, and their audience looks forward to the next installment. I see a pony, Daddy. What do you see in the cloud? Simplified software delivery. And every week there's something to sort of resonate and connect back to the brand. And then we've extended that over time. When some of these do particularly well, like this one, we create animations, animated versions of these. And we've started creating animated movies. We've done a lot of work with Google on 15-second pre-roll videos as ways to use cartoons and ideas that we know that work. But at the start of it all, it's that serial cadence and setting an expectation over time. My own email newsletter that goes out every week has an almost 50% open rate, and it's because people are looking forward to the next installment. Okay, the last idea I want to share is this idea about stepping away from the microphone. And oftentimes, as marketers in content marketing and what we're creating, we forget to hand the microphone over to the audience that we're trying to reach. The New Yorker is one of my favorite forms of cartoons. I think it's the high watermark standard. But they ran into an issue back in the late 90s where they had gotten to a point where they weren't listening to their audience. And the joke was that most people didn't understand the cartoons that were in the New Yorker. And in fact, it led to a Seinfeld episode about Elaine going to meet the editor of the New Yorker to try to describe and answer, what does this cartoon mean? And the editor of the New Yorker himself didn't even know. And the funny thing about this episode is that it was actually written by a New Yorker cartoonist. Bruce Eric Kaplan is both a common New Yorker cartoonist, but he was also a writer on the Seinfeld show. And I find it really interesting that right after this episode, or within a couple of years after this episode, the New Yorker invented what I think is one of the most engaging forms of interactivity with an audience that I've ever seen, which is the New Yorker caption contest, where every week there's a caption, there's a cartoon that needs a caption, and they ask people to provide ideas for what the caption should be. They get over 5,000 submissions every single week. This example, the bottom name here, Roger Ebert, is the famous film critic who had a column in the Chicago Sun-Times for years. This was his 100th submission in this contest. He used to joke that he did more writing for the New Yorker caption contest than he did in his day job at the Chicago Sun-Times. And this was the first one that he actually won. But it's a sign of what happens when you turn the microphone over. And it became something that's really been credited with helping make the New Yorker where it is in forms of journalism. People go right to the New Yorker caption contest. And I think there's something to learn about from content marketing versus the approach of just churning out content. Here's a top 10 list packed with keywords that search engines might like, followed by a passive-aggressive sales pitch. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Let's use branded hashtags to start authentic conversations as long as we can control what anyone says about us. Hashtag good luck. And I think we have to learn to turn over the microphone a little bit more. And something that I've been trying to do with a lot of our campaigns with clients. This was something that we did with IBM, where we actually opened up a forum to allow people to share their stories with us about their frustrations with different types of analytics. And then every week, we'd pick one of their stories and then turn it into an actual cartoon. We finally pulled together that custom report you requested. Sorry it took so long. And then we'd send it back to them reflecting something that had come to us through one of their stories. And it became this back and forth conversation that initially started with an audience. And we've done a few other things that have been kind of interesting. We set up a green screen environment at a trade show and allowed people to step into a cartoon and get an image of themselves actually as a character in the cartoon. And then it became something that they could share through social and even get a printed copy of. I see the same joke about, what do you see in the cloud? Simplified software delivery. Somewhere this guy pulled in a chair. But look at the excitement of these people that they get to star in a cartoon. And I think that's something that I'm trying to do more philosophically with the strips that I work on and with client engagements, trying to turn over the microphone and make it something that people ultimately resonate with, not because of what it says about the brand, but because of what the content ultimately says about themselves. So just in conclusion, thank you so much for having me. I created a cartoon book of the last 15 years of cartoons, and I brought with me as many as I could possibly carry, which, because I'm not very strong, is not that many. But in the break after the panel, if you're interested at all, just find me. I have a few set aside for those who supply captions at the beginning, and then the rest is first come, first serve. But thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.